I will call the WSESD board meeting to order at 6:10. Thank you everyone on Zoom and everyone else here in the board in the meeting, physically in the meeting, for your patience as we worked through some, as I didn't. I'm thanking Paul and everyone else who worked through this to get us here. So, meeting of the WSESD will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Not seeing any. Okay, so we have a very full agenda and we have a lot of really important stuff, so we're going to try to be mindful of the time. We're starting off with student matters. Are there any, I don't see any students here, but are there any students in online who would like to?
I'm here.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
I just want to, okay. Is there anybody on the, like, the food administration here? Like that, you know? Well, if there is, I just want to give like a round of applause to them because the food in the high school has improved a lot since I first started high school. And it's just great to see people actually excited to go get food now and to have more and more fresher options. And then I also want to mention how a younger student I know in the elementary school was learning about like the Black History Month, and they said that when the teacher was teaching the content, they kind of mushed it together with bullying, which I don't think is a terrible idea, but I also feel like to educate our community about, you know, Black History Month. I feel like there's so much more than bullying and all like of the more negative aspects. And yeah, I just feel like we could probably work together as a community, as a team, to kind of make sure that all aspects are kind of covered, not just all the like bullying.
Anyone from the administration want to respond to the second one?
Thanks for the feedback, Alora, on the food. We have been hard at work on that since we heard how we started the school year. And in terms of your comments around Black History Month, you really broke up, but I think the point you were making is that we should be teaching all of history all the time, not just during, you know, February. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. And if you were able to see board members and probably members of the administration too, when you mentioned that the food at the high school had improved, you would see that people were clapping, and so they really appreciated hearing that from you. Is there anyone else, any other students who would like to share anything with the board? Okay. One more time? No one, no students? Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing that and continuing to come back to the board and share the information that we certainly wouldn't have because we're not in the schools all the time. And so we appreciate that. Thank you. so we will move on to the administrative report. We have a number of things for that. The first one is, well, I will say that I had some questions from different board members, and I did compile them, and so I sent them to Mark so that he would have an opportunity to review them and prepare, determine whatever it is that information he had. So this is one of them.
Before we get started, just backing off of what Alora said to start the meeting, since this is our first meeting in February, I did want to acknowledge that it is Black History Month. And last week as a school district, we participated in Black Lives Matters week, and we've been doing that for several years now, since the start. Also, a colleague of mine sent me parts of a lyric from a poem from Amanda Gorman. If you remember, Amanda was at the Obama inauguration and inspired so many people with her words. So I thought I'd read this portion of this poem called A New Day's Lyric. Be bold, sang time, for when you honor yesterday, tomorrow ye will find, know what we thought need not be forgot, nor for none. It defines us, binds us as one. Come over, join this day just begun, for wherever we come together, we will forever overcome. So thank you to that colleague who shared that with me the other day. In terms of the agenda items, I did provide some written responses. How do we want to go about? I do know Mike Kelleher is here to speak directly to that first bulleted point. Who wants to start with that?
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. So in September, we began a partnership with the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity. Curtis Reed, I believe his title is president of that organization. Curtis has been an important part of our community for a number of years. And his group has contracted with a number of other organizations, including the Vermont State Police and several other school committees, school boards throughout Vermont and beyond the Vermont borders. And so we started this agreement for 20 hours of contract work. To date, we've used about 8 of those hours. We're sort of keeping that portion in reserve for the summertime. We'd like to do a training program for all of our administrative folks on diversity and equity. And Curtis and I have been talking about some of the ideas that he has around that. But just to put things in perspective, to date, one of the first things Curtis did for us is we put together in HR an overall workforce development plan. And part of that plan, as you all know, is the Grow Your Own initiative, as well as college recruitment. I've been talking about this before. We're going down to AIC in just a couple weeks to participate on an on-campus recruitment activity. AIC has about a minority enrollment around 60%, and they've got an excellent education program. So we're hoping to attract some folks to come in up to Vermont. So he helped us vet that process. One of the other things is we've been talking about EEO data, and he's helped guide us in terms of doing a better job of identifying our various constituents, and we're hoping to have better data because we all recognize the importance of that. He's helped develop some onboarding materials for folks that come from diverse backgrounds, and he's given us a couple different variations on templates that we want to share with folks when they join us. As the old saying goes, the best recruiting process is a strong retention process. You can keep them. You don't have to go out and find new folks. And then we've been talking a number of other things along the lines of retention. He and I have met for a total of, I believe it's 8 times now since September. And we've had some pretty robust conversations. Curtis is a really interesting guy, and I certainly value his counsel.
Okay. That's the update there with our consultant work. In terms of Panorama, maybe Paul could give us an overview of where we are right now this year and what
Sure.
we're about to do.
We are in the midst of the administration of the student climate survey. Once that's done, the next one would be the parent survey, and then later on in the year, the teacher perception survey. We're at, I looked it up, we're at a 10% completion rate right now, but I track that on a regular basis, let the principals know when, what their particular participation rates are, and go from there.
Yeah, so the climate survey will be available throughout this week and then continue to be available when we come back from February break.
My understanding at the Leadership Council meeting at BUHS from Hannah is that the BUHS survey is going to be done February 27th. Is that accurate? Okay. Then is there space, is there time now to add the questions to the custom part of the survey that we've been talking about for quite some time?
Not this survey. We sort of we hit a deadline for getting the survey out and didn't include those questions. We can certainly include them in additional in future surveys. But this survey, once you load it, it's set.
So the February 27th high school survey is loaded? What does that mean?
Correct. What I have to do is decide on the questions. The questions that I used were the same questions that we've used in the past. Attach them to a roster of students that gets uploaded. And then as the students log in using their student number, that connects them to that specific survey.
Okay. Yeah. It's unfortunate that we can't get those custom questions this year. This is something that came up back in August 23 when the board met and we talked about the survey. And the Student Advisory Committee has brought it up. When Laura brought up a question that she wanted to pose, I thought that it might be good to add it to the custom questions. But this is a lesson for the board, I think, that when sometimes we make suggestions that get put on the back burner, it's best if we just make a motion to really get things set and to establish a timeline. I'm glad that we can do it next year. I'm sure there'll be a lot of input for those custom questions, but it's just unfortunate that we can't do it this year.
I do want to caution, I don't think we want to overload the survey with additional questions.
No.
So I guess I would hope that there would be some discussion rather than going straight to a motion that says you will add these questions.
Oh, of course. The survey right now, as I understand it, is a very abbreviated form compared to the full Panorama. We asked a total of 16 questions, I think. 5 for climate, 5 for belonging, 6 for custom.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it abbreviated from a student's point of view, but.
Paul, so for a custom question, would you recommend starting it at like the high school level, like as an exploratory thing, like next year, like this is something we're doing with the leadership for the high school, and then maybe as years go on, maybe doing it to the other?
The surveys are established as grades 3 to 5 or 6 to 12. That's baked into Panorama's work. So were we to do that, we could add it to the 6-12 survey.
6 to 12, okay.
So
Thanks.
one section that we haven't done is classroom engagement, which might be, just for an example of kind of question, A question from the classroom engagement section of Panorama asks, first they set it up by saying, think about your first class, not advisory, but first class of the day. That way you get a complete sampling. And the question is, overall, how interested are you in this class? That's something I think that gives us a good idea about how engaged students are, and it's a good question. Or how excited are you about going to this class? So questions like that, but we'll get there.
Just to be clear, if those are pulled from Panorama, those wouldn't be considered custom questions?
I don't know, but we could still add them to the custom.
Absolutely.
I think one of the issues that I'm hearing is at what point do we modify Panorama? How early do we have to be? And I know one of the issues is that we ideally want to set up a board calendar so that we have these markers ahead of time.
Sure.
Which is something that we're working with Mo on.
I mean,
So-
I can take the questions now and sort of build a survey that would get used. But I guess the question I have is, if I have, input on questions from a bunch of different places, how do I adjudicate that?
Oh, right.
That's a good question itself.
That's a good point.
This does sound like something that would be appropriately collaborated on between maybe a committee of board members and sort of administrative staff. Because you're opening the door for possible redundancy in questions and things of that nature. I think a collaborative effort might yield better results.
Maybe as the new term starts, whatever committees are sort of determined to be helpful and appropriate maybe one of those committees would be one that would take up just that and work with the admin and see if there's something.
To be clear, the questions on the survey that and specifically those custom questions that we've done for 15 years, this is the first time that the board has said, we want these questions on this survey. Generally speaking, that survey has been an instrument that administrators determined were needed in order to understand what's going on in the school. For what it's worth.
But sorry, can I speak?
Okay.
But it certainly can't hurt to have, for admin to continue to do it this way, but for there to be just a small contingent of board members to have that back and forth conversation.
Yeah, the degree to which the board wants to involve itself in the day-to-day operations of the district, which presumably the survey is.
Yeah, so then I think there's another view that says maybe the survey is not so much the day-to-day operation, but the survey is something that is presented to the board as being chock full of data. And then I think sometimes the board is asking, well, what about this or that, and how can we get that information?
Sure, the board doesn't tell we don't need to go there. It doesn't tell us sort of which screening assessment to use.
Right. Conversation.
Sure, happy to have conversation.
Well, I think it's also helpful to remember that any motion that's made does require or give the opportunity for discussion, and I would hope that, I certainly have tried, and I hope that it's seen this way, that there's been a request for the input from the administration, because we are supposed to be partners in this, so I hope that it's seen that we're trying to at least move towards that direction, each other.
I was thinking, in listening to the conversation too, and thinking about planning and the strategic calendar, and the cycle, it might be a great thing to look for a continuous improvement goal that's collaborative between the board and the administration for next year, to be really clear about those timelines, and that could be present in the CIP to work toward that as well.
Thank you.
I will say, Paul, I do really like these little banters. I find it very interesting, and I really appreciate your kindness in teaching, and one of the things that I found really interesting when we talked about in the policy committee, we had talked about sort of the differences of like looking at the screening of marginalized students versus like white students, and like the perception of like, well, how much is over discipline based on if you have such a small portion. And I actually went home and I just started thinking all about this, like different and one of the things that came up for me was, well, if one student is repeatedly disciplined, does that come up as one or does that come up as multiple? In sort of like looking at the different categories of like over discipline. So like your conversations when you ask these questions, like I did have conversations like with Tim and other people, and I'm like, yeah, like if it's one incidence, but it's one student that's multiple, how are we evaluating the differences in over discipline?
Right. Were we to look at that question of disaggregating suspensions by race, ethnicity, absolutely we need to look at individuals, individual numbers of individuals, not numbers of suspensions, because those are two different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
I found that, yeah, thank you.
So can we bring this up tomorrow at the policy meeting,
Oh,
please? I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Would you bring it up tomorrow?
Sure,
The policy meeting
sure.
at 2 o'clock?
He asked the question, so I just.
No, but I'm trying to lighten my load right now
Yeah.
in remembering this for tomorrow's meeting. So I'm putting it off on both of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's great.
I can't wait.
Anyone else who would like to, I'm sorry, Paul, were you?
No, that was it.
Anyone else who would like to, questions, comments? Okay, all right, back to Mark.
Can I just say one thing? And I think this is right now dead in the water, but we had a meeting at Dummerston School and we had a really pivotal presentation on MLSS at that time. Thank you very much, Brittany. And we were tight on time. And we had a number of questions coming from board members having to do with MLSS. And then the next meeting, we were tight on time again. And the meeting after that. So I think just in general, we need to be careful so that when a presentation is made, the questions come up in a timely fashion. And sometimes for me and others, that timely fashion is not the meeting in question, but the following meeting when we've had a chance to mull it over. So I just in general, for all of us, as things get put on the agenda, we have to be careful about timing.
Okay, appreciate that. Tim?
Yeah, I had a lot of questions about MLSS after the presentation, and it shows my naivete in when I read the responses to a lot of follow-up questions that I had about MLSS. So I want to really thank the administration, the Office of Curriculum and Assessment for taking the time to respond in depth to these questions. You know, for example, my question, how has the high school staff been involved in the decision to implement MLSS? Asked about the time for professional development. I had a basic misunderstanding that MLSS was an initiative, a program, and not just a different way of dealing with academics. So your responses helped. My problem is, I got to read the responses in an email that was sent to us, and it's about open meeting law. The other people at this table who didn't read the email and the public isn't privy to this, to these responses. And this is something that really should be, open to the public. So I think one way of getting around it is when there's a back and forth and a lengthy response to a set of questions after a presentation, maybe we can just post them post them with the next agenda. So the agenda for this meeting could have had the email from email responses. It would have helped everybody. And also, just as a reminder, when something goes to the board, we have 2 student reps that it should also go through. Typically.
Yeah, I can have the responses posted for the minutes of this meeting.
Okay.
That would be good.
Great.
MLSS Q&A.
Thank you.
I like what Deborah said before, you, Tim, about reserving time at the meetings to engage in the back and forth, because I don't want to get into it selfishly, or where we're writing follow-up reports after every meeting.
Yeah.
It's timely. Okay. Are there other specific questions?
Are we ready to move on to the next? Okay, all right. Questions about the school board reports? There were, is Ruby online?
Ruby is here.
Okay, wonderful. Ruby? This is the.
I think that I had flagged a few questions, and I appreciate that Mark did reply to them and sent a written response that was forwarded to the board. I had, there were a few lingering ones, or I had follow-up questions around, I think 2 points. And well, sorry, I'm a little sick, so my brain is not really working properly. But I think I have a concern that, we have the leadership councils are a way in which we understand what's going on at the schools, and also it is a vehicle by which our leadership council representatives are passing information to our school communities, and I'm concerned that I understand, and we did get a report from Guilford at their community engagement, which seems very robust through their PTO, but I don't think that it's adequate to if there is no active leadership council, then I don't think that that's adequate. And so figuring out what the concern is or what the issue is, what is there a format issue? Is there a reason that that's not continuing? I think is important. And I see this when we received a report, an admin report today, or for today's meeting, and in reviewing it, I think that there's a question, or at least one was posed around: is this format of relaying information back and forth, or does it work anymore? But what I see, because that's what's being used now, are some gaping holes, and I don't. It doesn't feel good to me. The purpose of the school board reports, or the reports that we receive, and particularly the leadership council kind of questions, was really an attempt to try to codify engagement between the board and the leadership councils, which is our opportunity to connect with individual communities in each town. And I think that it's still a work in progress and it can be improved upon. But to me, it really is problematic that we don't have active school or leadership councils at all schools.
Well, I'll comment to that. We do have active leadership councils in all of our schools, except for the Guilford situation, which they presented a while back. I will invite Guilford representatives to our March kind of check-in time with leadership council chairs. They have participated in those orientations. We did send out a survey. Ruby helped develop that survey. We only got 3 responses from the survey. However, the 3 responses were favorable in terms of the systems that were set up. And I think a major takeaway was a vested interest in having board members attend those leadership council meetings. And when there's active and consistent participation from board members at the LC meetings, they feel like they are serving their purpose. So like anything, I think there's plenty of work to do. I am heartened by the fact that all of our LCs are up and running, meet regularly. Guilford's on its own little island right now. We are planning another orientation in March, a central office that Mom and I will host. Even though we only got 3 responses on the survey, we'll start with that as a baseline in terms of having a conversation. But yeah, I mean, still a lot of work to do, but earlier in the year, I think we had a couple of schools who are struggling meeting regularly, and we're pretty much meeting on a regular basis right now at this point in time. In there, I did notice more participation and the feedback on the LC questions at the bottom of the form.
I was just like in looking on these reports, the leadership council portion of the admin reports, it did seem, I think Ruby might have just said this, that some people felt like they just had a good communication flow with their board representative and that they didn't feel like they needed to utilize this report format. But I just wanted to make sure, is a board member currently assigned to all of the leadership councils? Is there any that don't have one? Because there was a comment on the Oak Grove one that it was ambiguous, but I wasn't sure if they were saying that they didn't have somebody or that they just wanted in-person visits.
I believe there's a board member assigned to every leadership council.
I'm assigned to Oak Grove.
Oh, okay. So they want you to come see them either?
Okay. I've been, what do you mean they want me to come see them?
It said that on the report. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to call out a specific person. I just wanted to make sure that we have someone assigned, because I know that in the past, there's been sometimes where like a bunch of months went by without a school board member showing up to the LC meetings at Academy, and people felt really disconnected by that. So I was just trying to make sure we had coverage. It was an ambiguous comment that I wasn't sure what they meant by that.
What was the comment?
Let me see if I can find it again.
I have it.
I would say I think we're getting better at all of our school sites. For many months to start the year, Oak Grove didn't even have a leadership council.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
It says we're interested in having our board rep visit us in person at Oak Grove. So I wasn't sure if they meant to the meetings or like they're inviting you to come to see the school at some other time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because they started up in September, and we've had a meeting every single month. I've been to every single meeting except for the one last month. Those meetings primarily are, like, I am in Zoom in the meetings.
I see.
And you know, I will definitely try to get there in person when I can, but you know, I do have 2 little ones and I'm trying really hard to, I'm on the committee, I'm on the social justice committee, and then for right now, the capacity of what I'm doing with the board, like this has become a full-time job.
I hear you.
So, and I do have a part-time job that I work 30 hours a week, but I just looking at the time within, it is about a full-time job. If I were to attend every single meeting in person, I wouldn't be able to do that. So Zoom is really like, and I'm just being honest with you guys, Zoom is like a saving grace for me. I'm really grateful that as a parent, I can be on the board because I think that the capacity of like what you would, if to do this in person, parents wouldn't be able to be on the board. So I am right here, I'm in person today. I have childcare today. I'm trying the very best that I can, and I will try to attend in person, and I'm sorry that if...
No, I'm wondering,
Yeah, I think they're inviting you to visit the school might have been what.
I'm wondering if it's that maybe schools are hoping that the board members, they
Yeah.
see some physical presence just overall. And not necessarily the leadership,
Yeah.
at the leadership council meetings.
I mean, we don't even have our meetings in person for Academy's Leadership Council for that very reason, that all the parents are like, we can't.
So, I mean, maybe it's
I think Zoom is
something
a
that
vehicle.
could be a goal, that at some point, maybe the board member could, maybe go and just have a tour of the individual school. It sounds like is that what you think they're asking?
Yeah,
I can't
that seems
imagine
like
that
it
they
would
would.
make more sense
That
than,
they would,
I wasn't sure what it meant.
I think any board member, could certainly understand being kind of, each person is doing a lot. Yeah, so, Deborah?
As a board member, I just want to acknowledge, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed with the drive to get not just to the school I'm assigned to, but to get to every school in this district. And I have not gotten there, and it's been a year, and I'm tracking it, and I'm about to tell a lie right now. I was going to say I do not have a full-time job, but that is a lie. By virtue of what I'm doing on the school board. And I just want to acknowledge that for so many of us. And then there are individuals who, to reiterate Eva's point, are working full-time, have children, are trying to do this, plus everything else, and are fully committed to doing this. And this cannot be a board of individuals who have time during the day to juggle all these threads. This has to be a board that reflects a diversity of lifestyles. And I think that's really critically important. And I think that when a comment is written, we've just got to give it a little bit of space. We Zoom, we go in person if we can, and we may be assigned to a school as a board member, but somehow I view my responsibility to every school in this district, not to the school that I'm simply assigned to. So I really just want to defend the hard work of every board member right now.
Thank you. I have an easier question. About Pam's average number of absences per day. It has 31.65%. Can you clarify that? What does that mean?
Should be a number, not a percent, right?
Yeah, my registrar does it, so I haven't seen that number.
I think we do percentage at the high school.
There's an average daily attendance that's
Average number of absences per day.
I was
So
just gonna
that
say that
means
the high
for-
school does it as a percentage, so I know that the high school does has it.
Well, we don't have a third of our kids out, that'd be 100 kids out every day, but, so I don't know, it might be 31 kids,
That's in line with what other schools.
which is about 10%. There's a lot of sickness.
I wouldn't think that you would have 1/3 the school absent every day.
I'll check in with her, but I assume it is 31 kids a day.
Okay.
And we had the same problem 2 months ago at BUHS where one of the numbers was like way off, and we checked in with the person who did the data, and it was something in the programming and power school that came up as a
Well,
default.
for the high school, it's average daily attendance percentage, and you have 690. That's easy to figure out.
Yes, both are confusing.
All right.
Yeah.
That's really good attendance. 190%.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Someone's gonna fix the budget.
Yeah, I also noted some of the things that Tim has just referred to, but I'd like to talk about Guilford a little bit. I attended every leadership council meeting that I could, which was most, at Guilford at the time that they had it, but I'm remembering back to the development of the Articles of Agreement. And one of the tenets was that each school was going to retain its own identity and be its own, just really its own school. So that's great. And Guilford used the Leadership Council for quite a while, and then they thought, you know what, there are some aspects of this are not working as well as they could. So they switched to a PTO. So how that isn't following the tenets of the Article Agreement, I really don't understand. It's Guilford deciding to do things one way, and the rest of the schools dividing it, to abide by the Leadership Council. So I don't understand the confusion. Thank you.
So this has come up briefly at policy meetings about to what extent is every school required to have a leadership council? And it goes back to a reading of Article 15, which was a referendum. And I believe the language in there, I don't have it in front of me, is shall. So I think that's why this has come up, as well as the evolution over a very short period of time of leadership councils. And we've talked about this in policy, that leadership councils are evolving. And we have to see how this is going to work out in the long term. And then again, offshoot of these discussions, Mark and Mo have arranged to have summits during the year for leadership council chairs to iron this out.
Guilford has sent representatives.
And for Guilford as well. So I think that's what's going on here in terms of discussion.
Okay. Can I bring up one more thing about leadership councils? Again, getting back to BAMS, there's a really interesting note here. How can we use better access any community resources such as HCRS and others to support our struggling students and families? This is a good topic for discussion, kind of topic that I wanted to follow up that the school engagement with the community presentation. But I'd like to ask how the school does engage with community organizations. Do they know, for example, a friend brought this up, that the Root currently has mutual aid fund for BIPOC Vermonters? How many BIPOC students know about this opportunity? I know the high school has the social worker that's connected with HCRS, correct?
No.
Oh, what is that? I just read it.
HCRS currently doesn't have any contracts with the district that I'm aware of.
No.
Okay, I thought the high school had.
We do work with HCRS.
Yeah, we work with HCRS.
Nevertheless, how can the school be proactively seeking advice and input from community agencies?
I actually wrote that comment. It was just based on the conversation that happened in our leadership council. It wasn't, it was part of the conversation. I think you were there. So that's why I wrote that, because we didn't get to these questions in the meeting.
Oh, this is where I saw it says HCRS/social worker caseload.
I think the way that it came up in the conversation was that we were talking about how much our schools are offering a lot of these types of wraparound support, and that wondering if there's a way we could lean on some of our community orgs more. But I know that a lot of the things that are happening is because they're in the past, sometimes those orgs are at capacity themselves, and so if students' needs weren't getting met through reaching out, then we ended up just at a position for somebody to provide that support in-house. But I think the conversation in the leadership council was asking, is that something that we could relook at and see is this a time where maybe we could start building more bridges to actually keep our work more at a school and see if community support could provide more of community support. And I know you had your hand up, Matt, I'm sure you have something to say about
I was
this.
just going to say, you referenced the local interagency team meetings that Lori Schreiner at HCRS holds monthly. I believe Tate Erickson attends them pretty regularly, and I'm sure Lori would welcome any additional members to sit at that table, and if there was need from the community where HCRS could support, they would.
And there's other agencies, the Energy Commission, for example, could advise schools that are striving towards better carbon emission reduction, things like that. But I still get back to, what does it mean, HCRS/social worker caseload?
Well, that's a question that's on all of the reports.
That was probably reference to Success Beyond 6 contracts, and HCRS at one point had a multitude of different clinicians throughout the district. Those have largely gone away.
Oh, okay, so maybe you can tweak this a bit, take that out.
And just another piece on the local interagency team meetings is that it's a multi-organizational community team meeting. So when we're talking about RAP services, there's often NFI, DCF, other districts are at the table as well.
If I could just give a meaningful example to that, all of the agencies that you just mentioned, we are in communication with for some of our students on a daily, weekly, or progress monitoring basis. One of maybe the faults or areas that could be improved in that is to bring those services in a little earlier. We usually are accessing those services on an urgent basis. So if there's something that, if the data demonstrates, if the experience of the student demonstrates that that the school needs more support, then we work with those services. We bring them into the school. They offer good communication to get a higher level of care if needed for the student.
That's great to hear, Tracy. Thank you.
There are other agencies, not quite agencies, Building a Positive Community used to be called Brattleboro Prevention Coalition. We're close partners with. We have an arrangement with the Boys and Girls Club to provide some tutoring from high school teachers. So there are other organizations in town that we are collaborating with.
On to the next topic. Oh, the BUHS Principal Search.
Yep.
Do you want to just touch on that and then we'll go into executive session?
Sure, I can give an overview. Posted the position in early January. Put together a search screening committee and interview committee for about 20 individuals. Covering all stakeholders. From there, after a series of Zoom meetings with that committee, establishing the process, reviewing the process, reviewing interview questions, getting aligned, we spent the day interviewing the candidates that came through the resume review. From that, the work of that screening committee led to 2 candidates that were moved forward for a final round, which happened on Friday. Those 2 candidates met with close to 60 individuals throughout the day. A group of teachers and a group of students. For each of the rounds, we collected data and recommendations from the folks who have participated. And I'm prepared to make a recommendation to the board.
Okay. So is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that there will be a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A3, the appointment or employment of a public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public officer or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for its final decision during open meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of finding that premature general public knowledge will clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, Okay, thank you. So now I will ask if there is a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A3, the appointment or employment of public officer or employee, provided that the public body shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public officer or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for its final decision during open meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. We are in executive session.
Did you say we were inviting anyone into this?
Thank you very much. I will ask if there is a motion, an amended motion to go into executive session, inviting Mark and Mike Kelleher into the meeting, into the executive session.
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstention? Okay, we are actually, okay, so we we're back from executive session at 7:19. And does someone want to make a motion to?
I move that we accept the recommendation of Superintendent Spino to hire Hannah Parker as our new BUHS principal.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you very much.
Speech.
Start planning. It's exciting, thank you.
So I, as a member of the search committee, I just really want to commend the superintendent. I'd like to commend the HR director. I'd like to commend Mo Hart for all of the hard work in organizing this. I thought the process from beginning to end was thorough. We all had a voice. It was just really well organized. So, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so now I will ask if there is, did you want, anything else you want to say, Mark, before we move on?
No.
Okay, I will ask if there is a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that there will be a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A1B, labor relations agreements with employees. Is there such a finding?
So
Matt made the motion for the finding. Okay, thank you very much, Matt. Any discussion? All those in favor of the finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. So is there a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A1B, labor relations agreements with employees, and inviting in Mark Spino and Julianne Egan?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Matt. Any discussion? All those in favor of entering executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, we are in executive session at 7:23. We are back from executive session at 7:36. Is there a motion to be made?
I move that we accept the recommendation of the superintendent.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion made, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So now we move on to the fiscal report. Are you all, did you have anything else, Mark?
No.
All right. Okay, so now we move on to the fiscal report. And EES budget amendment request.
So this will be short and sweet. This is to request your support for us to submit a Head Start budget amendment. Basically, we are wanting to redirect a savings of $75,000 that we've accumulated from a couple of positions that still remain open at EES and the related fringe benefits, and redirect them to the development of a new playground structure at Burge Street. You may remember that we moved 2 of our Head Start classrooms from Canal Street this fall over to Burge. And Burge has been our site for early Head Start, so ages 0 to 3, and now we have the preschool age there. We have a beautiful spot for the playground. We actually already have purchased a shed, and it's there. It's runs along the parking lot side. And we are projecting that the cost of the equipment would be about $57,000 and fencing about $18,000. We will need to fence the entire area. Of course, we will go out for a formal bid process, but we know that we have that money right now. We'd like to redirect it. This budget actually ends June 30th, so we want to do it now before the end of the year. So I'm asking for your support. We do have approval from Policy Council, and so now it comes to you.
So you are asking for a motion to approve
A budget amendment so that we are actually, in our Head Start budget, we are redirecting $75,000 from our personnel and fringe line item to equipment.
Okay. Robin, did you get that?
Yes. I move that we approve a budget amendment for EES to redirect $75,000 from personnel and fringe to equipment.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will move on to the annual audit. I'm hoping that Frank is still here.
Maybe it's.
I am still here, yes. And congratulations, Hannah. That's super exciting. Glad to hear we are moving ahead here with you in the leadership position. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Paul, if you could let me share the screen. Maybe we're all ready to go on that.
Folks disabled, I think I'm not the host. You?
It's Deborah.
You're able.
Deborah would love to, I think.
Deborah would love you to take her laptop.
Okay, should be good, Frank.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I'll be brief because I will run out of a voice here in a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm the bug that's gone around the valley here, the county. Okay, so the annual CPA audit has been completed for the fiscal year ending June of 2023. It starts with this engagement letter. The engagement letter essentially establishes the scope of the work, and so much of this is required by the Vermont Department of Education, and then it's also guided by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board rules, and then there are audit standards that they also have to comply with. So that's the nature of the engagement letter and scope of work. You can see I won't go through all of the details here, but a couple of significant kind of substance as to what they're doing. They're looking at our compliance with the provisions of law, all kinds of regulations, both federal, state, and then contract provisions, with various institutions that we do business with, whether it's a bid award or a service agreement. And then any to whatever extent we kind of deviate from the requirements. Then in addition, they're looking for the internal controls that we have in place internally that guide us in our daily transactions and the way we record information that is all part of the public report. So a little bit more about their scope here in this engagement letter. As we roll through various components, they get into what we're obligated to do in this engagement. And as you know, we are responsible for recording and monitoring and financial transactions of the district, and then reporting to various agencies. In addition, there are all kinds of operational requirements that just follow these auditing standards and internal control rules. These are the things that really have made the United States very distinguished in the world in terms of why we are the central currency in the world. It's because we have these auditing standards. We have fairly strict rules. We have a lot of oversight, and it's a very transparent process as well. So for this work, their fee is $62,000, and then an additional $10,000 for the required what's called a single audit for specific grant programs. So there's a little overview of their work. Here's the actual audit report for the period ending June 30. This is on our website, as is all of our annual audits. It's under the finance office. I believe this one here is also under the board agenda this evening, which I had sent out, or Mo did on my behalf last Thursday. We actually had just received this final version that morning. So this is a 111-page document. Obviously, we're going to crunch that down into less than 15 minutes, which we have on our agenda here. But again, a super brief overview of what's in the audit report. Statement of net position is a standard statement that all entities report. Generally, public schools in Vermont do not put that report in the annual reports. Obviously, we want it in. It has to be in the audit report. But the state of Vermont and tradition in Vermont has focused more on a fund accounting format, which is these things. So we'll look at both of those. Basically, the difference is fund accounting is more of a current measure of financial activity and resources. Statement of net position brings in fixed assets and depreciation, also the liability for bonds and any loans. It's all part of a more comprehensive balance sheet. So we do look and compare both of the formats. So you can see there's a lot of schedules that help describe the financial statements and the basis for which transactions are recorded. Toward the end of the report are supplementary documents. Many of these mirror what we do put in our annual report for purposes of providing the public with insight into the various programs that we have. So, end of the report, because we do receive substantial federal resources, the federal government, whenever they provide resources to a public school, they require a review when it's more than $750,000 annually. And that review, again, is looking at the obligations, the criteria that were described in the grant, the ability to use those grants for the purposes that they were intended, and then to what extent did the district comply with that. Couple of notable schedules in this 111-page report. We always like to see an unqualified opinion, and we do have the unqualified opinion indicating that Windham Southeast School District financial statements they do fairly represent the financial condition of the district. So we'll move over to a couple of financial statements, and maybe I'll just make a couple of connections to our own annual report and the budget documents that you've had now for several months. Here we are, as I was saying, total assets, liabilities, and net position of 54 million. This includes capital assets. That's something you don't normally see on a fund accounting balance sheet. That would be a different accounting methodology, but we do capture it for the purposes of the audit. And then the liabilities also here include the bond obligations. Then we have the revenue and expenses and changes in the position of the district for just the 1 year. I just wanted to show you the statement that it should be familiar to you, and that it's something that we share with the Finance Committee, and we include it certainly results of this in our annual report. So this is the fund basis balance sheet for the Windham Southeast School District ending June 2023. And probably the most important number on the page here, fund balance. That's the difference between our 10 million in assets under the fund accounting rules, 5 million in liabilities equals fund balance. It's the extent to which the district is solvent or not. You see that here in the general fund, and then we have the capital fund. So if you were looking at your annual report, you would see these figures, 4.4 million, 4.8 million in our audit report that we include here. Here is the annual report, and I'll just share that reference with you here. Here's the budget document you have, and here are those numbers: 4.4 million, 4.8 million, general fund, capital fund. And you may recall we shared this with the board back in December for the first draft. We're very pleased to see that the auditors did not recommend any adjusting entries for our $65 million budget and results of operations for the year. So those are probably the most significant statements. But it is really important that folks do understand the requirements, for managing a public entity and complying with audit requirements. They're not particularly flexible. There are rules, and we must follow them. And if we don't, then they will identify them as findings and make us correct them. Here's our endowment funds. We have 6.2 million net position as of June 30th, 2023. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of applicants and activity every year that receive support. Our students receive support from these. The notes to the reports are here. They start here on page 27. Again, it's the narrative. So for folks that kind of glaze over with the numbers, here's the narrative as to the rationale for what we do, why we do it, and often the source. It's kind of like a citation of who tells us that we have to do what we do. So you might find that interesting. It also discloses the basis of accounting and a number of the regulatory agencies that we always have to be aware of and up to date on For example, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, this group right here, does issue new rulings, not necessarily every year, but it's not unusual for there to be new rulings. One of the more recent one was a requirement to consolidate all student activity transactions into a revenue and expense format. So that's something that we've done, and it's part of this audit. Probably don't need to say too much more about this. You might find of interest a substantial footnote on post benefit liability, so post-employment benefit liability. So what this is primarily getting to is the teacher retirement system. Okay, and to what extent is the state funding teachers' retirement? That it is a statewide plan, so this is not specific just to Windham Southeast School District, but we are part of that system. So they have, I think, about 14 pages of footnotes on the health of that fund. So here are those statistics. Maybe the last thing I'll mention is toward the end of the report, there's a summary of the federal financial overview. And it's an opinion on our compliance with federal requirements to receive the grants that we have received. We've talked a lot about how significant these grants are in terms of helping us invest in intervention and support for our students. This is a pretty comprehensive overview of the grants. So you see there's a number of them. That's on page 99 if folks wanted to look at that a little more carefully. And then finally on this document, here's their opinion on internal control and any kind of findings. They refer to a separate letter for that. I will show you that as well, but that is generally the framework of the report. Here's the schedule of findings. And we're very pleased to see this takes a great deal of work from a super team at the central office, and of course collaboration with all of our educators throughout the system. But no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance, and then no unresolved issues. The yes here means that if the federal government gives us money, there's a low risk that we won't implement the grant according to the rules. And that's a really important opinion. Not everybody gets that opinion, but we are very pleased to have that. Last thing I'll say here with this management letter, here's the side letter that basically says, our opinion, that the district has complied and fairly presented the financial conditions of the district. And then a management letter is designed to say, by the way, here are some issues that should be addressed. And once again, we're really pleased to see that the auditors have not noted. So right here, we noted no transactions of the district for the above mentioned year audited for which there was a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. So authoritative guidance is our internal controls combined with state and federal, and then consensus or deviation from practice. So that's a kind of a gold standard. in an audit opinion letter, and it takes a tremendous effort to get to this point. So start this process in May. It's a very intense review into July, August, September. Once the state has provided us with all of the receivables that are recorded as of June 30th, oftentimes they don't liquidate those receivables until September. So the auditors wait until then to do their final reports. And we have to work with them concurrently with budget development right up until last Thursday.
Well, thank you, Frank, for all you and all the admin staff who have worked to put this together and all year round work to make sure that we are receiving grants as many as possible, and that's where the financial position of our district is well. So thank you very much, and my apologies. I didn't realize that this was going to be so difficult on your voice when I put it on the agenda. So
yeah, I wish I could have predicted it, but no, I appreciate your comments, Kelly. Thank you.
it's Tim, and then Sean. I know you have a connection from the finance committee, so Tim.
Okay, so 16 V.S.A. subsection 563 lists the duties of a school board, and Article 17 of that says very specifically that the school board annually approves the audit. So I would like to make a motion that this board approve the 2023 audit as completed by R.H. Smith.
Okay, the motion has been made. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, sure, there could be. Yep.
Sean.
I would like to reiterate the accolades that you have said, Kelly. I think it's really important for everybody in the central office to know that such a successful document is in hand. And I did have one comment. As Frank was going through it, he spoke about the endowment, and maybe he's still online there. I think he said it was close to $4 million. And I would also like to say one of the most important things, and this is for Hannah, is the Eames Scholarship, which is every spring. There's a big endowment. So any student that is interested in the arts, which is a huge bucket, can apply for this Eames Scholarship. And it's been well subscribed, but it's really good to see it in the annual report, and to know that, I mean, it's such an advantage for this high school, such an advantage. It's, just amazing.
Thank you, Sean. Is there any other discussion on the motion that's been made? I can't see online. Okay, I don't see any hands up from anyone online. Robin, did you get the wording of the motion? Can you read that back?
That the board approved the 2023 audit as completed by R.H. Smith. Is that what that name was?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, wonderful.
I might add that R.H. Smith in the audit, which is a real page turner, described themselves as professional skeptics. I like that term, professional skeptic. Something I aspire to.
What a shock. Well, is there any other discussion on the audit before we move on to the budget? Okay, seeing none, we are hopping on to the FY25 budget concerns. Don't know I know there was a finance committee meeting, and I'm not sure, perhaps Sean can address the concerns, and I'm sure that Frank is still here, but maybe this is an opportunity for him to rest his voice.
Yeah, I'd love to speak to him if I could. If you look at our state funding formula sheet, which is page 3 in the most recent thing that Frank has handed out, there are a couple of things that really should be highlighted, I believe. And the first is the budget, which is a 3% increase over the previous year. And then the next line is the revenue. The revenues, as everybody knows, have been reduced, but there are ways for the district to actually change those revenue numbers. And that would make it more favorable because it would make the education spending less. And obviously the education spending is how you come down to a tax rate through the number of equalized pupils, and then also the yield number comes into that, and then you come down to a tax rate. So I think it's really important for people to think about the 3% is probably the most critical thing. And then the other thing is that in the tax rate as proposed after the cap is, let me just find this here, 1.657. So that number is certainly higher than last year, but it's actually lower than it was in 2022. So if you take the whole view, the long view, and you look backwards, you realize that even with the situation that's going on now, our tax rate is less, the district-wide tax rate is less than it was in FY22. So I think it's really positive. As sort of a summation, I think what I would recommend, and maybe I should make a motion to this effect, that the WSESD board recommends that we stick with the March 19th annual meeting as proposed and continue with that annual meeting. Thank you.
So have you made that motion?
Yes.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
With so much uncertainty about House Bill or Senate Bill 850, which we don't know if they're going to pass it next week or what. There's just so uncertainty. I feel uncomfortable about committing to a March 19th date. I accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee to not move the date at this moment, but right now I'm a little uncomfortable about making a motion to stay with it, just because of the uncertainty.
Yeah, in rebuttal to that, it's so important in running a system like this that things are done in a timely manner. If we put off the budget, which probably will not be exactly represented in this sheet that I just referred to, but there'll be some changes, and whether we held the annual meeting on the 19th or sometime in April, those numbers there are no magic numbers that will come up because of the legislators saying that we have permission to postpone our annual meeting. And if that is done, and then you have contracts, retaining teachers, capital plan projects, it's all totally uncertain. And so how does a system of 2,200 students go forward? And you know, it's not being fair to the students. So I'm really hoping that we vote in favor.
Ruby and then Robin.
I feel like I have. I'm going to ask. I think a simple question. Frank's probably going to say it's not very simple, but from if we're anticipating that the cap will be removed, and we need to, the expectation is that we would reduce our budget by some amount. And I did participate, or I heard some of the commentary during the finance meeting, and so I know that there are a few key places in the budget that could be adjusted. I understand that point, and that I think that Sean spoke to that. What I don't understand is if we believe, it seems like the writing is on the wall. If the legislature actually moves in the way that they're, Emily Kornheiser is talking about moving, what are we like? How much are we being asked to reduce our budget? Whether that's realistic or not, what is the actual number? And if we don't reduce the budget in a way that is considered adequate, are there penalties now that we are expecting will be put into place? And if the answer is, I don't know, we got to wait and see, that's fine. But what's our best guess or understanding of how this will proceed?
I'm gonna ask Frank if he has, and then, Frank, is that something you can respond to since Ruby specifically asked?
Sure. No, there has been no definitive target, and the target will become the yield number. Whenever the yield number is set, that will identify the tax impact. There's no legislation that I'm aware of in process that is asking districts to make a specific dollar amount reduction. So going back to Sean's original point, our plan is based on student need and where we are at right now in this process of getting through the pandemic and also addressing our 20-year capital plan, create health and safe schools. We feel that a 3% spending increase in the environment that the whole country has just gone through is a very reasonable financial commitment that our community can certainly look at those investments and make a judgment as to whether they think 3% is a reasonable investment in our student future. So we've been in situations many times over the years where there's some wrinkle or development that puts into question what will be the tax impact in June and July once we're through the process. And I've never seen there be a benefit to jeopardize our ability to retain our staff by delaying employment contracts and putting into question all of the bids. We just went through the bid schedule for projects that if we're going to capture those contractors to repair our roofs and to upgrade our old last boiler at Oak Grove, we must retain those contractors now. And if we delay a vote and create even more uncertainty, the legislature has created enough, it seems to me, but if we create even more, we jeopardize our ability to retain staff by limiting our capacity to issue employment contracts. That's very unsettling for the staff. And then to what end? Typically, the legislature doesn't announce the final yield numbers until sometime in May. And that's absolutely too late to warn a budget and move forward. The problem with that as well is that, once again, it's totally reactive, and it's not assuming that we've done the best, most responsible job we can to be prepared to open school next September. So that's the one thing we absolutely know is going to happen. We need to be prepared to operate a public school next September, and this time cycle is about as late as we can go to be assured that we can do that.
Frank, I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to do it before Sean responds, because maybe Sean's response will be responsive to my question as well. So I'm trying to get a handle on, I had heard somewhere that we might be forced to change our dates, or that there would be something that would, if the voters approved or disapproved or whatnot, that there would have to be some sort of further action or some, it wasn't clear, it's not clear to me. I just know that there was a question that was presented to me about this. And that's where this whole thing about would we need to move, and how would we know if we needed to move, and, you know, trying to be prepared for this. So my question is this. I'll try to make it make sense. Is there something that there's stuff going on with the legislature, hopefully, but is there something that they're doing or could be doing that would then affect, let's say we go forward on the budget vote at the annual meeting, and is there something that the legislature could or would be doing that would affect that would be affecting it either before the annual meeting, so that it would affect whether that's the actual budget that goes forward in front of the voters, or something that they would be doing that would be affecting the budget, even if it's voted on. So I guess those are the concerns I think that I'm certainly kind of grappling with, and I think maybe other board members are sort of trying to figure out. In many other years, maybe we wouldn't have had this issue, and so it feels like this is another mountain we're being forced to climb. So I don't know if any of that makes sense, and I appreciate that it is a hardship. I'm sure that it's a hardship on you as well. So I hope that makes sense, and I don't know if Sean, if you or Frank have a response to that, to hopefully make me feel better about this.
I just have two things. If you look on the revenue, and then you think, okay, we can increase that revenue by using fund balance, then that changes the tax rate in a favorable manner. So, as an example that Frank just said tonight, we just received almost $250,000 from the state for the merger. I mean, this was 2019, and I guess it just came in very recently. That's pretty important. Then the other thing is that if we did not go ahead with the annual meeting, that means the capital projects that Frank spoke about would be in jeopardy. That means that we give back the federal and state money that has been allocated in the grant form for those capital plan projects. So it doesn't seem very favorable to put the annual meeting on.
Agreed.
I understand that, but what is going on with the legislature? Did we lose Zoom?
No, it's fine. Just the thing.
Okay. What is going on with the legislature that could? I guess that's really the question.
I've attended the hearings. Oh, I'm sorry. Does Frank want to say something?
Oh, I'm happy to speak to that. Yeah. The legislature has on the table rescinding Article 7 of Act 127, which removes the 5% cap. That's that 5% cap on a tax rate. Okay, so they've removed the cap, which is incentivizing districts to either reduce spending or identify additional revenues. As Sean just articulated, $1 in new revenue, like fund balance, is the same thing as if you reduce spending by $1. It has the same exact effect on the tax rate. But to your question, Kelly, there has been no discussion at all on some way to override the state statute and I believe it's part of the Vermont Constitution that gives the electorate the authority to either approve or amend a school board proposed budget. That they would have to change that law, and I have heard no discussion at all about that. So Christina made a great point in our finance committee meeting, which is, in the absence of legislative, definitions around the funding formula, our electorate can make a judgment on March 19, as to whether or not they feel that this is an appropriate investment in our students' future. So those are the two dynamics, Kelly. There's no indication that if we take an action, that the state can subsequently come back and say, well, now we're going to make you cut X, Y, and Z. There's no provision for that. And then as Sean is indicating, what certainly Mark and I have spent a lot of time on in the last several weeks since we've been made aware that the state is unprecedented retroactively changing the law that the whole state used to develop the public school budgets. Pretty unprecedented, but it does appear that change is going to be the removal of the 5% cap, which would require us to revisit what you may recall we talked about 3 years ago when in budget development, and then again 2 years ago, and then last year. We would look at, if we're forced into a situation to assure that we do not present a tax that's in like 20% increase CLA adjusted. We wouldn't do that. Mark and I would not bring that to the board. We may have to do what we said we would likely have to do, and that is look at our 10% turnover that we have at each year in staffing, and use discretion as to, is that what it's going to take in order to stay under a 20% tax impact? Those are the sorts of things that we can do along the way, as Sean was just saying. We can make these adjustments so that we protect our taxpayers, but most importantly, we think we need to be able to retain our excellent educators. We need to reduce the amount of uncertainty that is existing right now. We need to be able to move forward. And we're confident because you just saw our fiscal audit. We are resilient on a financial basis. We can make this adjustment in the storm and get, I think, to a good place. I would just hate to see us make it even more uncertain by suspending the budget vote date.
Robin?
Yeah, as someone who has difficulty understanding these things, I just want to see if I can sum up where we're at here and make sure I'm understanding this correctly. That we already have a quite high CLA adjusted tax rate in the proposed budget as it already stands. And now there's this added threat, I guess, of it could become even higher than that if they pass this legislation that removes the cap.
Seems unlikely, Robin. Just so you know, that does seem unlikely because if they withdraw the 5% cap on the tax, that their assumption is that they will be able to increase the yield, which will substantially reduce those CLA tax.
I see. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So because that would end up not compounding it, but ameliorating the tax rate, that's why it feels like we don't need to take extra time to make changes to our budget. Is that kind of the basics?
That's a very good way to put it. Yeah. Or think of it in a relatively oversimplified terms. If they remove the cap and those districts that put in additional reserves because the cap paid for them, it's highly likely they're going to remove those out of their spending plan. We didn't do that. We presented a 3% increase. Many districts, I've been told by Emily Kornhauser that many districts were proposing budgets that are up 13%. It's like, wow, we did not do that. We wouldn't do that. But the point is, Robin, is if that materializes, which is highly visible after March 5th, after town meeting, the legislature will know that, and that money can be put back into the education fund as a resource, which then allows the yield to be adjusted, which lowers everybody else's tax rates.
Tim and then Ruby.
Yeah, I had to hear
I'm sorry, were you done, Robin?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I had to hear it twice in the finance meeting and now here. But I've been swayed to go along with the motion. I think it is a good motion to fix the date at March 19th.
Okay.
So thank you for the arguments, Sean and Frank.
Ruby?
I so appreciate what I hear Frank saying, and I see that I do think that this is a responsible budget, regardless of all the turmoil that's happening in the legislature. And so I feel strongly about that. The concern I have about this motion is that from my perspective, we approved this budget to put forth where it feels to me, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I guess we have a warning that we're considering now. I'm in support of keeping the meeting at the date that we currently have it set, unless and until some other turmoil comes up that indicates we need more time. And it feels to me what we're hearing from Frank is we don't, and from Sean, is that we don't need more time. This is the budget. This is the right budget. And what I heard in the finance meeting is that some nuance around where, things that could shift and change, what I don't understand there is we as a board have approved a budget that's being put forward. Tweaks, like I heard in the finance committee meeting, would that mean that it's a different budget that is being put forward? Has the budget already gone to print? Those are logistical questions. From my perspective, we already set we have had a date for months, and making a motion to not change it feels to me kind of, we can, but I think we have a date. We move forward with the date. We'd have to make a motion to suspend that date, and that I don't think is a good idea. But it's also not the motion on the table. So,
and Ruby, just to clarify, the adjustments that we were talking about in finance did not change expenditures. It was changing the offsetting revenues that Sean was referring to earlier in the meeting. So if we increase offsetting revenues, which would be things like Sean just mentioned, just this morning, I got an email from the Agency of Ed indicating that the funding formula provides $201,000 for Windham Southeast School District as a merger award. The AOE had not given me that earlier. That is new revenue that reduces our tax liability. We can revisit use of the general fund balance, as we have had a history of utilizing. So those are all revenue side assumptions. They have the same impact as reducing spending, but we haven't discussed any kind of change in spending at this point.
Matt, did you?
Yeah, just and barring some unforeseen circumstance, I too agree that this budget is the right budget for our students and what we need, and based on the needs of our students. The story I tell myself is, if there was some unforeseen thing, catastrophic thing that happened in the legislation that had an impact, a significant impact on the taxpayers of our district, that the story I tell myself is that we could set forth, it might be a variety of things that we need to do, might be cumbersome, but we could present a different budget at that point. Am I correct in that understanding?
Well, that could occur at the annual meeting on March 19. Yeah, so like between now and March 19, if, as you say, Matt, there's some unforeseen action of the legislature, we can take that into account, and you as a board member or any member of the public can make a amendment to the board warned budget that reflects whatever it is that we need to reconsider. So that is totally possible. Once March 19 comes and goes, and if the electorate approves our budget, that is what I'm obligated to report to the tax department, the total spending by June 1st. So we still have between March 19 and June 1st to consider the revenue side of the picture. Once the voters approve our budget, that's a static, you'll see in your warning a little bit down the agenda here, shall the voters authorize the district to expend $65 million? That is unalterable. Now, of course, the school board can always spend less than that, but you're not authorized to spend more. And that is a scenario that is possible that we would have to consider after March 19. But bottom line is we know we need to operate school September 1st, and we will not be able to do that if we cannot retain our excellent educators. And that requires us to move forward relatively quickly after March 19.
So just to be clear, right, that if we were in an unforeseen, we could spend less. Essentially what I want to try to avoid is like some massive unforeseen burden on taxpayers, right? In no way am I saying we should not do what's best for our students. But we could spend less.
You could make a motion at the annual meeting to say, I move that we amend the budget by reducing the amount by $1 million or whatever, and then that we're gonna say we will meet these other needs by adding money from the capital fund. But that part is just like an intention. The only thing you can do at the meeting is to change the number, and then if everyone there agrees, then you can change it.
So I'd like to go back to the motion that's before us. And I'm not sure why it's a valid motion. Because the date of March 19 already exists. So I'm not sure what the motion is doing in relationship to the 19th. I really don't, I'm not comfortable casting something in cement at this point, when it's already on the books.
Well, I have to say that before I let Sean speak, as I'm listening to the discussion, I'm not sure that I didn't warn it with action to be taken, so I'm not sure even if we were going to make a motion to move I'm not sure that we could even have done that. So I guess I'm not sure whether we can actually go forward with this as a motion, so I'm going to ask Anne to consider if she would not
No, we can.
Oh, because it's on the agenda?
Yeah.
Well,
Because
but
it's
it's
on the
not,
agenda.
but it's not warned with action
We don't need to
taken.
warn a motion. The motion can arise during discussion.
Okay.
I wonder if it might be more of a point of order, though, that you're saying is a motion necessary to follow through with something that we already are doing.
Well, that sounds like that's Deborah's point, but now Sean.
Yeah, I think I used the word recommend in the motion. That the board recommends that we do not change the March 19th annual meeting date. I think it is important for the public and all the citizens in all 4 towns to realize that the district believes that this budget is very realistic in terms of what has to be accomplished for our students. And because of that, and because of what Frank brought up about being able to increase the revenue, so it's just more of a word of faith that we are going to continue on, retain teachers, hire new teachers if it's absolutely required, do capital plan projects so that we do not lose the benefit of the monies that come into the district as revenue, and then shift some of our capital fund, not our capital fund, our general fund, to the revenue side, and that way we can actually work to lower the taxes.
Robin, do you have the wording of the motion? Can you read that?
Well,
or
the word that I wrote down was that Sean said, I recommend that the WSESD board stick with the March 19th annual meeting as proposed and continue with that meeting.
So the word recommend is what I was referring to.
Right.
So in essence, this would be like a non-binding vote to kind of support keeping it.
Yeah. It's a statement of purpose.
Okay, well, so is there any more discussion? Ruby, have your hand up?
Yeah, so I share the same concern that I hear from Deborah. Looking at our agenda under new business, the first point of the first agenda item is approval of the warning that sets the March 19th meeting. And so it feels to me when we were this agenda item that was discussing budget concerns, I was not anticipating a motion coming out of this. I think this is a superfluous motion. From my perspective, I'd vote this down, and then in 15-20 minutes, when we are considering the approval of the warning, vote that up. This seems like an unnecessary step. I think the conversation that we've had is very necessary. I think we voiced our concerns, we voiced our support, and I think that I sense alignment on the board, but I don't think that this particular motion is necessary or appropriate at this time.
I'd like to rescind my motion.
Okay.
That actually requires it. Never mind.
I'm sorry, say it again?
When a motion is rescinded, it actually requires a vote.
Okay, so Sean has essentially offered to rescind his motion.
The motion.
Sorry, thank you, Tim. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the rescinding of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, so the motion is rescinded. Is there any more discussion on the budget concerns before we move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda? And then, of course, when we get down to new business, we will be addressing the warning articles. Is there anything else before we move on? Okay, 8:36. And I'm going to actually take this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion, the very needed discussion. I don't know that it answers all the questions, but I think there's so many things out there that we don't know and are not really in our control. So I will take this moment at 8:37 to take a 10-minute break. I'll take a 5-minute break. 5-minute break.
10.
Okay. We're taking a 10-minute break, and then we will be back at 8:47 on the dot. We're going back. It is 8:48, and we are back.
No, it was a double on that. Yeah.
Ideas.
I'll send some.
So we are back, and we are on to the consent agenda.
Okay.
So the clerk's report Is there a motion to approve the minutes of January 16, 2024, January 23, 2024, and January 30th, 2024?
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes as listed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to warrants and payrolls. Warrants of January 8, 2024, in the amount of $1,025,562.15. January 16, 2024, in the amount of $198,937.67. January 22nd, 2024, in the amount of $220,194. January 29, 2024, in the amount of $560,382.15. January 5, 2024, in the amount of $1,193,943.80. Payrolls of January 12, 2024, in the amount of $1,609,628.27. January 26 in 2024 in the amount of $1,620,000 and $1,620,002.04.
So moved.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, that was a tongue twister. All right. So all those in favor of approving the warrants and payrolls as listed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry, who made the motion to approve all that?
Kim made both motions. Okay. So it is 8:49 and we are moving on to public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone making a comment can expect a response that falls into one of the following categories. Receive an acknowledgement of the comment with no further action planned. Receive an immediate response by the board chair or administration. Administration will be directed to contact and respond to the person. Clarification sought from the administration for a specified meeting. The topic would be added to a specified future board agenda. The matter would be referred to an executive session. A public hearing will be held on the matter. Do we have anyone in the online who would like to make a comment under public comment on agenda items?
Bethany has it.
Bethany.
Hi there. You guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. So in looking up the agenda for today, I landed on the WSESD webpage, and I happened to note the board norms that are prominently listed there. And those include, among others, contribute to an environment where all can feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings, be accountable for impact, including step 1, acknowledge the harm that has been caused regardless of intent of individual's action, and step 2, seek a path forward that is informed by restorative practices. 2 weeks ago, the WSESD board silenced the voices of countless victims of sexual abuse at the hands of educators with their refusal to share the results of the years-long publicly funded sexual abuse investigation. I'd like to make you all aware that the action you took has done the exact opposite of these norms that you have listed. You did not acknowledge the scope of the harm, you did not seek out restorative practices, and you have now created an environment where people and students not only feel uncomfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings, but in fact are silenced when they do. You have re-traumatized and broken the trust of every single person who came forward for your investigation, and you should be ashamed. The children in this school district, past, present, and future, deserve safety and accountability. So please either admit you don't care or that you're operating out of fear of lawsuits, but for God's sake, do better. Thank you.
I will say that the board does not intend to make any further public comment about the substance of the investigation itself, but Attorney Goddard's engagement is not yet completed. Thank you.
I'm aware you don't want to hear it, but I'm going to continue saying it. So are many of the rest of us.
And that's fine. That's you. We will welcome your comment anytime that you have a comment to share. We will welcome your comment, and we will also take this opportunity to restate that any current student, current teacher, current situation that is ongoing is already, there are steps in place to address that, and the superintendent is the person who would be addressing that, the board would not be. So, is there, Sherry?
Yes, I had a question for Mark Spino in regard to just that. what actions are taken if you have a current staff member or administrator who has failed to report? I wanted to see if you would provide more clarity about that, as well as the role of the Title IX coordinator in complying with the federal civil rights law against sex discrimination in education, and if she would be involved if a staff did not report.
Our Title IX coordinator, yes, would be involved.
What was the first part of your question, Sherry?
I wanted Mark to clarify what actions would be taken if a current staff or administrator had failed to report alleged abuse of students.
We would conduct an immediate investigation under those claims and then take action.
Well, Mark, I'm in a bit of a quandary because I have a list of current staff, administrators, and others who have failed to report to the district. But at the top of the list is you, Mark, as well as 4 other elementary school principals and 2 board members who were former members of the elementary school board when they received a complaint about an alleged predator participating in current activities with students. You were at that meeting as an elementary school board principal. Did you report, Mark?
I'm gonna ask you, Sherry, I don't know whether Mark you can respond yourself, Mark, but what I'm going to say is it seems like maybe you have some information or dates that of some activity or something that happened. I would encourage you certainly, if you don't feel comfortable sending it or trust the board, you certainly don't have to include us. Or you certainly can, if you would like to. But my suggestion is for you to send whatever your question is in writing to Mark and include information so that he can look back on what the date of the meeting. It sounds like was it before the merged district came into being?
Yes, it was the elementary school board, and 2 members of the school board were also on that board and are on this board.
Well, so sharing, well then maybe you wouldn't want to share it with this board. So perhaps if you shared with Mark the names of whoever you feel did something, didn't do something, whatever it is, and information, perhaps he can look back in minutes. I'm not sure what he would have to do to look back to try and determine what happened or didn't happen. But if you have concerns and if you have information about current staff, I would ask you very strongly, at the risk of sounding like I'm pleading to you, to reach out to the superintendent with that information. So I thank you for asking those questions. They are important questions. And it sounds like you might have information that you can share with Mark Spino, and maybe he can either respond to you offline or in a following meeting. So.
Well, I have one more statement. This was all reported to Amy Goddard. So somebody in the district has this information, as well as other reports of abuse of students, which I believe have not been reported. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Well, I don't believe that I know what you're talking about. So I would encourage you to reach out to Mark with that information, and he can certainly try to follow up on that, try to determine what happened. So I don't have any other response because I don't know what exactly we're talking about. So thank you for your questions. And Diana Whitney?
Hi, thank you. I am speaking as someone who was a parent in the district for at least 12 years. And now I'm also speaking as a parent who did report to Attorney Goddard. It was not regarding sexual abuse, but it was about abuses of power perpetrated by current staff member. And I'm here to say that I am dismayed that the information I shared with the investigator was not relayed to this board and is not being addressed. And I'm also just going to let you all know that it was very stressful to go take the time to report to the investigator. It took actually a lot of time and the process. And I was not even, speaking about something that was a traumatic, sexual abuse situation. I was speaking as a parent of a child who had been mistreated. And now that information went nowhere, or maybe to your attorneys, I want to say I feel personally betrayed, and that I can only imagine then to magnify that for the survivors who experienced grievous harm at the hands of educators who were re-traumatized by the act of reporting. I think that's maybe what the board doesn't understand, is how actually traumatic it can be to have to retell a story of harm. And then I believe that everybody who did report did so as I did, with the hopes and the expectation that there would be some transparency and that we would actually see some kind of statement of acknowledgement of harm from the board. Okay, acknowledgement of harm, some accountability, and when the news of the investigation began, there was a board member named Liz Adams, and she wrote, I actually think she said it in a meeting, she said, "This will not be swept under the rug." And those were her words. And she looked me in the eye, and she looked others of us in the eye, and made that promise. And then Tim Maciel made the promise about belief in institutional courage, and the board being absolutely committed to stepping forward now in a courageous way together. And I just want to know what happened. I think everybody wants to know what happened, but I understand that you made all the statement that you could make 2 weeks ago, but it does feel like it shouldn't be over. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry that that's how you feel. I acknowledge that. I will say that if you are a parent of a current student, that information would not have come to the board because of the nature of other processes. That information would have gone to the superintendent's office. I have no idea what specifically you're referring to. But the reason why anything with current staff, current teachers, current people currently in the schools is because the board may have to act as a quasi-judicial sort of judge for something if that teacher or member of the administration came through the process that is in their contract. It's a contractual obligation that the board has, that the superintendent's office has with the staff who we hope are here to take care of our children. So we are not allowed, we are not supposed to hear the information about the current teachers, the current administrators, because of that process. So if it is something that is, if you still have a student here, or if it's someone who is a current staff or current teacher, the board wouldn't have gotten it anyways. So I'm sorry that you had that experience, but it wouldn't have been something that came to the board. And I'm sorry, you made a couple other points, and I was intending to respond to them, but I'm sorry, it's escaped me. So my apologies for that. Mindy, Diana Whitney, I want to thank you for your comment. Thank you. Mindy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm leaving my camera off because of the connectivity problems last time. So I don't have a lot more to say about this matter. I don't have much to ask for from the board. I feel like at this point, any information released that's come from lawyers hired by the board is unlikely to be credible. But I would say that I've heard from others that they feel like this process re-victimized them, that the board and the district can now consider themselves abusers because they feel re-victimized by what happened, by the betrayal, by the deception of promising transparency. And I was in the community last week, and everybody I encountered expressed dismay that this happened. And one person said it's basically a green light to predators because they know now that they won't be revealed. They'll be protected by the district. So I just want to say that, in 2021, I alleged a culture of abuse, a culture of abuse and complicity. And I had hoped that this process would bring some kind of accountability, some way of addressing the abuse and acknowledging the harm. And instead, I feel that the most successful thing that has happened is that this district has confirmed a culture of abuse and complicity. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comment, Mindy, and I'm sorry that you feel that way. Again, if there are, my understanding of the goal of this was that we were concerned about this happening again, and we wanted to make sure that things didn't happen as we heard that they did. So, and a lot of work has been done by the superintendent, by the administration. A lot of work continues to be done. So, and I will just say that the board is not only asked to make difficult decisions, but the board is obligated to make difficult decisions. So I thank you all for coming and expressing your concerns and your feelings, and I want to acknowledge that you have come to us and shared those with us, and so thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to share in the public comment non-agenda items? I'm going to ask one more time, public comment non-agenda items. Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on at 9:06. On to the new business. The approval of warning articles for March 19 annual meeting. Is there any discussion? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the warning articles for March 19th annual
So
meeting?
moved.
Thank you, Sean. Now, is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the warning articles for March 19th, for the March 19th annual district meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? So we will move on to the WSESD Board School Director Candidate Forum and related dates.
I can speak to this.
Sure.
So just to give a little bit of background, in the past, this is something that the Communications Council has always sort of initiated some conversations about, and we've been really lucky to have a community member, Jamie Contois, who was very experienced with organizing and who sort of corralled all the necessary parties of moderator, space, and questions from the newspapers. She has moved away, and as we noted, the time is coming up for the elections again. Ruby and I met, and Michelle Green and Sean met to discuss organizing something for our current candidates. And Mo Hart did a lot of the legwork to see if we could reserve a space. Cindy Jerome is available to moderate it. And I think it would be held at the BAM's multipurpose room. And the date that was proposed was the 26th of February, trying to avoid the school break in case people were traveling for that. So I think that in the future, when Michelle mentioned that she had checked last year with the V.S.A to see, like, is this proper, you know, for a district to sort of organize its candidate forum? Is there a conflict of interest there? And they said it's okay, but in a lot of places, some other org does it, like League of Women Voters or things like that. But nobody in this community has really seemed to step up interested in doing that from year to year. So we were thinking that it might be nice to have a little bit of separation from the board organizing it. And I spoke to Mo Hart, and she said that's something that she could put into her workflow to just initiate setting up a place and moderator and connecting the newspaper. So for future years, I think it's going to be transferred over to being a central office thing. But just for this year, since it was something that we organized in our communications council meeting, we wanted to make sure that the whole board is okay with moving forward with this. And there might be a small amount of expense related to it, but I wouldn't think it would be more than a couple $100s.
And it's my understanding that Mo has already communicated with each of the candidates to let them know of the save the date for that. So, okay.
And this is Ruby. I can just speak to the cost associated with it, which is BCTV is under $200 in order to record and also be a Zoom host for the meeting. Although they would, if we want to ensure that we have more than 100 participants capability, there would be a little bit more. It would be a little bit more than 200. They'd need to increase it by $50. So the total amount, including a fee for facilitation, would be under 300, but in and around 300 potentially.
So I don't know if we need a motion to do this or just it's notifying, but.
I'm going to let Sean speak first, and then maybe if someone wants to make a motion to approve those expenses.
Yeah, I would just simply say, as far as the 9 candidates, if somebody cannot make the public forum, then they always can make a written statement or send a letter, and it will be read at the forum, probably by the facilitator. So.
Okay. Robin, did you want to make that motion?
Sure. I move that the board approve expenses of not more than $400 for the candidate forum.
Is there any discussion?
Actually, if I could just, Robin pointed out very astutely that there is no community organization that would usually do this, and we've lost Jamie, so that spark plug is gone. But I think that if the reputation of the Brattleboro Reformer in the Commons is excellent for stepping forward for things like this, so I think that after Robin's comments, maybe they'll rethink the fact that they didn't step forward.
I think they have participated in each of these forums by contributing questions, but they just weren't the ones to like initiate the event.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, any more discussion before we vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion to approve the expenses not more than $400 for the WSESD School Board Director Candidate Forum, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Okay, so now we will move on to pending Vermont Senate Bill S18.
Yeah, it's not common for school boards to weigh in on legislative bills that are pending, but this one pretty directly impacts the health of our students. So I'm going to make a motion that the WSESD School Board endorses Senate Bill S18, which in essence proposes to ban the retail sale of flavored cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and e-liquids. I have further comments, but that's the motion.
Okay. Motion has been made. Is there any discussion? Did you want to make further comments?
Sure. Recently at the High School Leadership Council, Ricky Davidson gave a presentation on e-vaping, what a serious problem that is at the school. Students go to him saying, "I'm so addicted, how can I stop it?" He gave he talked about the science of it, how children sometimes feel like they're drowning because the vapor actually is a oil liquid that turns into vapor and it reforms in the lungs and impacts breathing. It has long-term scarring of the lungs. It's addictive, it's dangerous. The General Assembly of Vermont notes that Vermont spends $348 million annually to treat tobacco-caused illnesses. They note that youth tobacco use is growing due to e-cigarettes. So you have 7% of Vermont high school students who smoke. But if e-cigarette use is included, that rises to 28% of Vermont youths. And 28%, over 1/4 of our students at the high school in our youth risk behavior survey reported that, yeah, they do use vapes. It's just a horrible addiction. Imagine students trying to concentrate in classes when all they want to do is suck on a vape. So it's, and then you have the monetary issue. Where are they getting the money? I went to a little shop on Putney Road that sells them, and it's $40 for 2 vapes. I don't know how many vapes you get out of it, but it's, the money is pretty significant. So I'm just, I feel that to support one of the co-sponsors, by the way, is Senator Hashim from Dummerston. Good for him for co-sponsoring this. I think that this is important matter for the board to endorse Senate Bill S-18 to ban flavored cigarettes and e-cigarettes.
What does it mean if we endorse it? Like, do you send a letter to someone, or how do they know that we feel this way?
I would certainly let Senators Kornheiser and Hashim know that we endorsed it, so they can bring it up in discussions perhaps about this is the support we're getting from our constituents. It's being hotly debated these days.
Just a correction, Emily is a representative, not a senator.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, a motion has been made for the board to endorse Vermont Senate Bill S-18, to ban the retail sale of flavored cigarettes and vape.
Flavored cigarettes and e-liquids is what I wrote down. Is that what you said, Jim?
This bill proposes to ban the retail sale of flavored cigarettes, e-cigarettes, and e-liquids.
E-cigarettes and e-liquids.
In the state of Vermont.
In the state. Yes. All those in favor of the board, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Now we move on to.
Under new business, I'm wondering if I can't raise something under new business, or is that out of order right now?
Well.
And the topic, do you want to know what the topic is?
Yes.
Okay. The topic is board retreat.
Oh, well, we'll do that under the subcommittees. Training, board matters training.
Oh, got it. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so it's back to you.
Oh, it's still back to me. Okay, policy and amendment. Policy committee recommends for a second reading, G8, continuous improvement plan, second reading.
Any discussion? Okay. Anything online? So then we will move on to, thank you, Deborah. We will move on to board matters training. We have leadership council updates and we have board subcommittees. Do we have anything for either of those?
Go ahead.
From Green Street on the reports, and I think it was even listed in the questions, the Green Street Leadership Council wanted me to bring to the board the question of, were these questions from the Leadership Council still relevant and still useful for the board? Green Street didn't feel our leadership team didn't see the utility in every month reporting on these things still, and wondered what the benefit was for the board to get this information. The felt sense was that the connection with the board member was sufficient to be able to bring forward any concerns they had, and vice versa for Green Street to be able to hear what the board was grappling with.
I think one of the reasons why, yes, you've got a board member in place who can report back and report back, which is great. But I think one of the benefits of seeing it in writing is that it's universal. We can all see it. And so can every leadership council.
Can they see these reports?
No, they're sent to board members. All board members see all of the reports, but not all leadership councils see all leadership council reports.
But they can see each other's minutes, just not these little condensed 3 bullet point things.
Robin, did you have something else that you wanted to?
Yeah. You know what? I'll just share it next time. I can't find the thing that I was gonna look at to report back, so I'll just save it for the next meeting.
Okay, Sean?
I perused the board report that Matt is mentioning, and what I notice is very often in the leadership council, a lot of the questions are missing. It's pretty thin in a lot of respects as to what comes back. So I was wondering if it could be recommended that the board, there's just a place for the board to express specific things without asking questions. In other words, just report what you want to report. Don't have these 3 questions.
I found what I was gonna say.
Kim? You.
Just at the BAMS meeting, it was a nice, productive meeting, but Carly Chickering she had a meeting that many of us on the board had attended as well this fall. It was warm out. So.
October 7th.
Early October.
Yes, it was warm. So she started reading through her notes at the BAMS meeting with Keith there, and there were actually 4 board members at the meeting as well. So, and she was just going through the list and things that notes she had taken down, and she had gone through about a third of it, I believe, and she'll be, going through her comments again at the next 1 or 2 meetings, just so that Keith knows what the parents and a student or 2 spoke about at that meeting, and then he'll be able to. He addressed some things, but it was towards the end of the meeting, so he'll be able to hopefully be able to address some more of those comments at the next BAMS meeting after he's had a chance to contemplate things.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. That's just what I was gonna bring up.
Anything else for either of those 2 categories?
Are we doing committees?
Yep.
Okay. I have a something I'd like to say for the Social Justice Committee. It's less than 2 minutes, and I thank everybody for hanging in there. So Black History Month for many people is considered their new year. myself included. It's a time for reflection and healing and appreciation for our ancestors, the hard work and lives that were given up for civil rights movement and continue to this day. The work continues. One of the things I reflected on, like when I was thinking about my position on the board and who could kind of guide me through this process and ancestrally, I kept coming up with Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was born in a plantation in Maryland, and he was separated from his mother as an infant. At the age of 8 years old, he was sent to live with Sophia Auld and Thomas Auld, and he only saw his mom 4 times before she passed away. The thing about Sophia, she was, people saw her as this benevolent, very kind person, and she, at the very beginning with Frederick Douglass, was kind to him. She taught him how to read the alphabet. And then she taught him approximately 4 words. Thomas Auld found out, and he put a stop to it. And he told Sophia that if Frederick learned how to read, it would make him unfit to be a slave, and he would become unmanageable and would have no value to his master. What ended up being kind of a tender moment Sophia ended up being pretty cold to Frederick, and she stopped teaching him how to read. And then he like anytime she saw him with books, she would take it away. There was a lot of she would like send him out to work like hard labor because he was considered a house slave. And what I found really interesting about Frederick is that he developed these kind of ingenious ways of still learning how to read. So one thing that he did was, there were white children, poor white children that lived around the area, and Frederick Douglass would take bread. Bread was considered really like valuable, and he would take bread and he would talk to there were poor white boys. He would ask them, hey, like teach me something that you're learning in school, and he would give them bread, and some of them would they would teach him like some of the words and things that he would learn, and he would give them bread, and they were really hungry. So he saw it as kind of like a way of it's like feeding the hunger, but they were giving like the bread, what he could have ate. He got so much more knowledge from that little piece of morsel of bread. So then he went to the shipyard and he learned 4 words, LSAF. So he would go to the shipboard and he would watch the shipmates write the letters LSAF. And that was the only 4 words that he knew and how to spell. So then he would go to these poor white boys, and he would do these little competitions, and he would say, I bet that I could write words better than you. And they would like, no, you can't. Like, you're a slave. Like, you can't write it better than us. So he only knew these words, so he would write the letter L, and then they would teach him other letters that they do in school. So he would trick them. And then he would take that knowledge and extend on his education. Then also Sophia would leave in the mornings every Monday. So and Mondays, Frederick would have the house to himself. And the master, Thomas's son, had already finished school, so a lot of his copybooks were upstairs in the, well, essentially like an attic, but where his room was. So all of his copybooks where he wrote the letters. When Sophia would go on Monday mornings, Frederick Douglass that was the only time he had the house by himself, he would write over the names of what Thomas's son would do, and then the spaces that were left, he would use that to fill up the spaces of the book. And he did this, and it took him approximately 7 years to learn how to read fluently. And he had a hunger, and it was just really inspiring to me, because as I look at our district and the things that are happening with reading nationwide, one of the things they talked about with Frederick Douglass was that Sophia, even though she was cold, she gave him an inch, but he took a mile. And I feel that education is contagious. I feel that it's magnetic. And I feel that despite poverty, despite wherever your circumstance, that if you give a child an inch and you inspire them, it doesn't matter how hard you try to suppress them and tell them and try to make it so that they don't learn, the information is already there. And with Frederick, once he learned that alphabet, it was too late. He became free, and he has this quote, and he says, "Once you learn how to read, you will forever be free." So I would like to think about him as I go on with my journey being on the board. And I'm thank you for taking that moment with me. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing.
Any other committees before we move on to the?
I have a leadership council.
Sure.
So the Putney Central School Leadership Council, we had it didn't appear in the questions in the board report, I think in part because our meeting was probably the day that that report was submitted, and so it just didn't make it in. But we had some extensive conversation around something that's been raised before, and I think the Policy and Amendment Committee may have it on their kind of list of things to think about in terms of class size. There was generally a discussion that started, I think, with the move in the future around universal pre-K and what that will mean for our elementary schools throughout the district. And then also an acknowledgement of a high number of inquiries that the school has received around in district transfers. And I think that those inquiries or kind of weren't rising to the level of formal requests, but more inquiries around, I like your school, how do I come here, kind of. And so we had discussion of that, and I told the leadership council that I would raise the fact that that had been discussed, and also kind of acknowledge that I think it would be good for the community generally, and for us as a board, to understand and reconfirm what the process is by which, if there is a transfer that's that comes before the superintendent, a request to transfer from one school to another within the district, what the process is by which that is considered and approved or denied. And then also the conversation centered around a question of whether or not they're in the same way as thinking about class sizes and policies around class sizes. Are there policies or things to consider around how many inter-district transfers would be considered within one school? I think that there's some guidelines around that from transfers in from outside of the district, but I don't think anyone, at least in the leadership council, was aware of any guidelines around inter district transfers. So that came up, and so it might just be kind of like something to pass on to Mark in terms of a potential future discussion or update around how, just acknowledging and reviewing how that process goes forth in terms of transfer requests.
Thank you, Ruby. One more time I'll ask before we. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to thank Eva for sharing those heartfelt thoughts about learning and Frederick Drake Douglass. You spoke from the heart, and I appreciate it.
Liz had a hand up, but I think it's down now.
Liz?
No, it's still up.
Liz? Did you have something on the leadership council or board subcommittees?
Yeah, at our leadership council, when this question of transferring, from one school to another, I told them the process, and that it isn't, we do not have school choice. And it's not equitable, for one thing, but I explained that you would ask Mark, and Mark would bring it, would think about it, make a recommendation to the board, then the board would meet in executive session and approve the transfer or not. And I think that people are forgetting that we do not have school choice. It's not possible. It's not equitable. The transportation costs alone would be unmanageable. So maybe that should be clarified to the public.
Mark, do you have?
Yeah, Liz is right. I agree with that.
All right, well, we're going to move on to the, Deborah, you have something on the board training.
Under board training, I just wanted to publicly announce that, Kelly and I are organizing a board retreat a week from today, Tuesday the 20th, between 5 and 9 p.m. It will take place in the Cusick room here. And some of the topics that we're going to look to address, and we are in, 1 week before, we are in early planning stages. So one is looking to develop a board calendar, which is long overdue, as well as taking a look at policies B1 and B2, which have to do with board self-evaluation and goal setting. And then finally, addressing onboarding strategies in anticipation of the new board being seated. And with that in mind, we envision, Kelly and I, a follow-up retreat in April for the new board, specifically having to do with onboarding strategies. And it's at that April retreat that we would look to collaborate with the superintendent in terms of very specific onboarding strategies. So I just, as an aside, and I'll put this in an email to everybody, Chapter 4 of the Governance Core, the book that is circulating amongst all of us for the June retreat, Chapter 4 is very specific onboarding strategies.
Okay. Any comments, questions, thoughts, etc.? Or you ready? Okay. I'm seeing none, so we are moving on to. Is there a motion to find that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, with the understanding that there will be a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A 1F, confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body.
So moved.
Thank you, Deborah. Any discussion? All those in favor of that finding, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. So then I'm going to ask if there is a motion to go into executive session under 1 V.S.A. 313A1F, confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body, and inviting in Mark Spino and attorney Kendall Host.
So moved.
Thank you, Matt. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session as indicated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, we are in executive session at 9:37, and we will have no action anticipated to be taken.